the report does not point fingers. It has not offered any conclusion on what went wrong. But the fact is that the sequence as narrated in this report, as described, speaks for itself. There are some conclusions that are not declared to be conclusions in so many words, but are inherent in the narration and in the description of what went on through the data that was recovered from one of the flight data recorders. And the facts are clear to an extent, and the stark facts, one has to say, are quite clear, that the power supply to the engine that would then feed the fuel into the engines cut off on its own, cut off simultaneously without any pilot command. That this is what caused loss of power, loss of thrust, loss of altitude and the crash. This was something that happened as a result of the systems within the plane without any instruction or command from the pilot. That is clear, and that is something clearly Boeing has to answer for. And there are also concerns about whether safety checks on the critical part concerned, the fuel switch that would be operative in the supply of fuel to the engines through its power source, has been a cause of concern for some time with a number of Boeing aircraft. The report says that that is common to Boeing 737 MAX, in which case, which as an example it was studied, and the Dreamliner, and that there had been an advisory from the Federal Aviation Authority for a check on this, and that Air India did not follow that advisory because it was categorized an advisory and it was not mandatory. So there is certainly concern over that. There's certainly concern that, as this report notes, about deployment of the RAM air turbine, which had been deployed even as the plane was taking off. And if it has been deployed as the plane was taking off, it could be that it was deployed before all the engine failure surfaced. So there are a number of facts that point to concern about the structure and the mechanisms within the aircraft, and these are certainly matters that the Boeing company will have to address, even if the report does not in so many words say that this or anything at all is its conclusion. The narration itself points to at least some conclusions.
Right, Sanjay. We are also joined by Anvit Srivastav on this broadcast. Anvit, now that the report is out, do you think it calls for a new set of safety standards for all flights now?
Well, certainly. See, the kind of incident it was, certainly some rules would be required to relooked at. And also, soon after the incident, DGCA had given out a notice asking all the airlines to make sure there are multi-layered technical checks and inspections to their flights. And also, particularly Air India, it was asked to undertake a detailed inspection of all of its fleet, not just including the Boeing aircraft and the wide-body aircraft, but also all other fleet, and which is an exercise that still is underway. But yes, see, as far as this investigation is concerned, the focus, as we previously also talked, was on RAM air turbine, and that was initially deployed. The report also goes on to say that the CCTV footages of the aircraft show that the RAT was deployed. Then now again, it is a question that when we have heard the details retrieved from the cockpit voice recorder, also when the pilots are interacting and one pilot asks the other that did you cut off the fuel switch, and he says that I did not. So there is a question, like rightly pointed earlier, that could there be a possibility that RAT was deployed before the flight or right as the flight took off. So that is something that needs to be looked into. These are the preliminary findings. They are not any concluding remarks though, but yes, the concluding remarks would be based on the initial findings, and initial findings clearly mention that RAT was deployed. Also, it goes on to mention that fuel supply was cut. It was switched from the switch has transitioned from run to cut off. Attempts were made to revive the engines, but it could not happen, also because there was no altitude and there was no time with the pilots. And as far as the conversation between the pilots is concerned, the pilots, when one asked the another, did you cut it off, he said, I did not.